fill your thirst beside the river. Wash the journey from your hands. Feel the comfort flow inside you. Come this far, you understand. Fear's not allowed, where dreams can be lost or found.
Okay, here we go.
Hello and welcome to Healing Outside the Box. I'm Traci Crampton and I'm an energy practitioner.
And I'm Rosemary Lachance, and I'm an energy healer and a spiritual advisor.
And we are dedicated to providing you with food for thought, discussion, and information and answers to alternative healing, spiritual development, animal welfare, nutrition, and our environment in the form of guest speakers who are experts in their field. We hope that we can help you find the answers that you're seeking for. And please feel free to email us your questions because we would love to answer them on the show, and we will give you that information later. We hope you enjoy the show.
Well, tonight is our 60th show, and it's called The Influence of Native Americans. And we have with us tonight a special Native American, Bill Gload. Welcome, Bill. So nice to have you here.
Welcome.
All right. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Bill. Bill Gload, which Gload is it's pronounced Mi'kmaq, okay? He was born in northern Maine, not far from the Canadian border. His father was born and raised on the Millbrook Indian Reservation near Truro, Nova Scotia. Mm-hmm. He lived most of his life on the reservation and spoke Mi'kmaq or Algonquin dialect as his primary language. The Mi'kmaq are the indigenous people of northern Maine, most of New Brunswick, all of Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, eastern Quebec, and presently live in Newfoundland. His mother was a descendant of the Acadian French, who were the first permanent settlers of eastern North America, north of Florida. They first moved in St. Croix Island in 1604, which is part of Maine, and then they moved to Nova Scotia in 1605. He was born in a place called Sear Plantation, Maine, and was raised about 20 miles away in a town named Fort Fairfield. The town was within the site of the Canadian border. Across the border was the Maliseet Indian Reservation, so there were many native people living in our town. He attended public school in Fort Fairfield and graduated from high school there. In '58, he moved to Thomaston, Connecticut, where he still lives, with his lovely wife, Mary. He has since graduated from Manatuck Community College. You have since graduated from there. Oh. During the past 25 years, he has become very active in Native American activities in Connecticut, and you can pronounce that word, Quinnentucket. Following is a list of organizations he has belonged to: the Connecticut Indian Educational Council, the Spirit of Quinnentucket, otherwise known as Connecticut River Powwow Society. He served as an officer while a member of that society. The Black Rock Powwow Society, the Eagle Wing Press as an officer and chairperson, the Eagle Wing Powwow Society. Institute of American Indian Studies over a period of 20 years. Wow. He has served 2 full 6-year terms on the board of directors and is now completing his 3rd 6-year term. He has held various offices, including chairperson, and is currently vice chairperson. He has done several programs at IAIS, which is American Institute of American Indian Studies, including teaching native dancing and the village interpretation program during the summer months. Would love to see Native American dancing. Mm-hmm. He is presently researching Native American influence of the Naugatuck Valley and trying to increase his knowledge of all indigenous people of Connecticut. He has done a presentation of Native American influence in the Naugatuck Valley for the Thomaston Historical Society and before the Senior Citizen Council of Thomaston, and also presentations for the Thomaston and Harwinton Public Libraries, as well as Western Connecticut State University. Bill has done presentations for Maloney Magnet School of Waterbury, and has also done presentations for several Boy and Cub Scout troops. He has visited Native American reservations in Maine, South Dakota, North Dakota, Idaho, Montana, Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, and throughout the Maritimes of Canada and the Mayan ruins in several locations of the Yucatan area of Mexico. Oh, that's interesting. Bill is an enrolled member of the Aroostook band of Micmacs. What is that?
You're a busy man.
Yeah, Presque Isle, Maine.
Pascal,
Isle, Maine.
Pascal, Maine.
A federally recognized tribe, and the Millbrook band of Mi'kmaq of Truro, Nova Scotia. He represents his heritage, he respects his heritage, and continues to seek more information and knowledge of America's indigenous people. Wow.
Makes me dizzy.
I know. That is so interesting. So many. A question arose to me when I was reading back here. How are the Native American reservations these days? How is life on them now?
Well, some of the reservations are fairly nice, and then some of them are kind of run down, and it all depends on the people themselves. Some people maintain good housekeeping, and like in Canada and also out west in the New Mexico area, the government has housing, helped them with housing. So like at the Pueblos, for instance, the girl says, if you look at the Pueblos, the ancient Pueblos where she has her trading post, it looks, like no running water and no bathrooms. But she says she has at home, she has all of that. Other reservations are, like the Navajos, are remote. They don't, it's each family lives 5 miles from the nearest family.
Oh.
And because of that, they don't have any running water, and they don't have the indoor plumbing and so forth. A lot of them still have the older type buildings, flat roof and that type of thing. Up in Canada, you find a variation. You find some of them that live in very nice housing, and a lot of them went to college and have kind of bettered themselves. Other people live in kind of run-down conditions. So there's quite a variation on the reservation of the various people and how they live. The younger people live somewhat different than the older people, and that type of thing.
Do they still carry on the traditions of their fathers and grandfathers of the younger people, or do they go in a different direction now?
The one that I belong to up in Millbrook, they're about just on the outskirts of a city, and they've been Anglicized, even though nowadays they have to have, I think it's an hour or 2 hours a day in their own native language. They have their own grammars, they have their own spelling and so forth, and they have to be taught. Up until recently, most, like in Maine and in Canada, eastern Canada, the schools were run by the Jesuits.
Huh.
So they had Catholic education up until just recently, but since then, since they don't have as many people anymore teaching, they've had the public education. So they have to have indigenous education so many hours a day. And now on the one where my sister lives on, up there, she lives on a separate reservation. They have about 3,500 people. They have their own radio station, and the primary language that is spoken on the reservation is Mi'kmaq. Now, to explain that earlier there, the native people are divided by language groups. In other words, in the East Coast, we're primarily Algonquins, except for probably the state of New York, where they're Iroquois. They have 6 nations, the Iroquois nations, and that's primarily the area that's drained by the Hudson River. All the ones of New England, Maine, as far south as New Jersey, probably Delaware, and as far east as the Great Lakes, were Algonquin-speaking people. And the people here, the indigenous people of Connecticut spoke a dialect of the Algonquin language, and Maine and all of New England, all the rest of New England speak that language, or a dialect of that language.
Well, does the government provide everything they need equally to everyone, or is do they get everything that they need seriously?
Well, they get the essentials. They get medical, and in some cases they do get assistance. But the way the nation's going, both here and in Canada, United States and Canada, is they're trying to make them self-supporting. So what they do is they'll provide them with an education, but after the education, they try to make them take care of themselves as far as the basic cares of food and fuel, and some housing. Like my people up in Presque Isle, Maine, they took over an old Air Force base, and they have housing there on the Air Force base that was there, and then they have several buildings, administrative buildings and that type of thing. They have a medical center, and that type of thing. They have administration plus the medical center.
Yeah, I was going to say it must be tough to determine like what is enough and what is too much, like in terms of your rights and what you want to protect of your culture, and the government,
Well, if you go back to the indigenous rights,
you have a right to, housing and land and all of these, but you also don't want to have to be regulated in a sense of, your culture.
Well, people talk today about government interfering with their lives. Nobody has more government interference in their lives than the Native Americans. The reservations out west and the reservations that are under the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, are very heavily governed by non-Native people.
Really?
What's the overall sense with that?
Well, if you go back in history, I don't want to go too far back, but you go back to the Indian movements of the 1970s, you'll find that the move there was independence. The original reservation system itself said that each of the reservations would be little nations unto themselves, and they would be allowed to govern themselves. But if you watch the old westerns, which are partly true, you can see how the Native people were rounded up and placed on reservations against their will. And then you got the days when the old boarding schools, they used to take the children off the reservation, place them in boarding schools, and they made them wear uniforms, cut their hair, weren't allowed to speak the language or practice their religion.
Wow. And so much for religious freedom and the...
Well, you talk about religious freedom.
What we were
you just touched another subject here.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
We, Native people, since 1976, prior to that, they weren't allowed to practice their religion.
Oh.
Prior to 1976. In 1976,
that's like yesterday.
They were given freedom of religion, but, for instance, you cannot join their religion. Only Native people could practice Native and belong to a Native religion.
That's a government law?
It's a government law.
And that's still in effect to this day.
Oh, yeah, since 1976. Prior to that, they weren't allowed to do any.
Oh, my God. Wow. All right.
But that's not really, that's even that's putting limits on the people who may want to embrace that religion.
Oh, there's a lot of people. That's why you have the, I forget what you call those people there, the...
Shamans?
Huh?
Shamans?
Well, the shamans they have, but they're talking about the ones that go up on the mountain there in the Soltis and I forget what Can't even think of their name.
Medicine men and medicine men, you go up on the
No,
mountain.
I'm talking about the non-native people
Oh, the non-native people.
that do that. They want to practice native religion, but they can't, so they have their own little cultures.
So they sort of
Their own little
formulate
communes.
their own,
They
yeah.
formulate
can't
their own.
practice? I never knew that.
I never knew that either, though.
That's
Well,
totally ridiculous.
There's a lot of misconceptions about what transpires with the native people.
Yeah. Yes. All right. I've always had a bug about this. I mean, Native Americans were here in America. That's where they're hot. They're the true Americans.
Natives.
Natives of America. Okay. So then they came over. The British, I guess, came over and made all the problems. Okay, right? And then
Well, there was four groups of people
Spanish,
actually.
French.
The Dutch came over first. First the Spanish came over and they settled in the Southwest. Then later you had the Dutch that came in around New York and up the Hudson River and trying to find that passage to India by going north and so forth. And then you had the French people that came in. And the French people, just might sound like I'm protecting them a little bit, but the French people came in, they wanted to exist.
Your mother has French heritage, right?
I have French heritage as well as Native American. The French people came in and they coexisted. They married a lot of native, the indigenous people, women. Like my people converted to Christianity in the 1620s, 1630s. And then the English came in, and the English wanted to regulate everybody. The Spanish were very brutal. The French coexisted, but the English wanted to regulate them. They wanted to say, we'll tell you where to live and how to live. And then you go back to the early days in Plymouth and in Massachusetts, in those areas. And of course, if you go back far enough, that's another part of history. King Philip's War, where this person named Massasoit, his two sons, one of them got killed, and that's what started King Philip's War, but that's another whole program. So we won't go into that right now.
Well, the thing is that makes me angry is because they talk about the plight of the blacks and what happened, the Negro, black Americans. And then they talk about the plight of the Chinese when they were brought over as slaves. They don't talk about the plight of the Indians at all, or Native Americans. I know we know, but I don't know that the audience knows them as Indians, and they don't talk about that at all. And I think that they were robbed the most, and I think the most wrongs were done to them the most. Okay, and it was so totally. I mean, okay, if you won't say at least on the same level, and that makes me angry. It makes me very angry.
Well,
and your beliefs before you became Christian were beautiful. As far as I know, I mean, you can tell me what they were, and you can tell the audience what they were, but I know that you believe in the spirit of everything. I know that they only killed animals when they really needed to, and they used every bit of the animal, and they prayed over his soul, and things like that. And they did everything so spiritually wonderful.
if you can say such a thing, they were kind of sorry that they had to kill the animal.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
But in most cases, they did not kill for the sake of game.
No.
They killed for nourishment,
Exactly.
and they believed most of them believed in a harmonious type relationship
With nature.
with nature.
All of
Exactly.
right.
And that's the way it's
which meant
supposed to
the
be.
animals was like a brother or sister.
Honored.
Yes.
But
Honored,
on the other hand,
respected.
there were instances where you had to, many instances of course, where they had to kill the animal in order to exist and coexist with them. And especially in the early days when the first migrations took place, because that's all they had. This is before farming took place and cultivation.
And especially in the north. I mean,
When it was
you have
cold in
you
the
have
winter,
you have a
Especially in the north,
growing season is
in the south you had some pretty good growing seasons.
Right.
But even then, so the climate was supposed to be colder in certain periods. When you talk about 20, we believe we have found enough to say that we've been at least here 15,000 years. And there's sometimes evidence that shows we've been here 20 and 25,000 years.
Amazing.
That there were probably different waves of people that came over.
Or Pangea.
Yeah.
Splitting
Well,
up.
and then
Is that?
When, I don't know, the theory that all the land masses were at once connected
yes.
and then split apart.
We as natives, if you really believe your faith, there's two beliefs. One is evolution, which a lot of us believe in, or some people believe in, and the other one is creation. Now, if you believe in creation, what we believe, some people believe, is that the native people, this is a turtle shell, by the way. It's made into a pouch. But just to illustrate something here, I have another turtle shell that I usually use. We believe that North America came from the sea on the back of a large turtle.
That's nice.
And that if you look at the turtle, if you look at North America, you can almost see a turtle with its legs going kind of out where Maine is, in that area. You can almost see it. That looks like a turtle. So we often refer to it as Turtle Island. We live on Turtle Island.
Okay, that's nice.
But that's the creation part of it. That means the Creator put us here and gave us this land and helped us and nourished it for us by giving us animals and certain plants to eat. So we have that belief as well as other faiths that have that belief.
I get emotional.
I know.
You talk.
I feel like it's a combination of the two, you know. It is a gift, and we've been given this gift, but we need to honor it and grow our spirits and evolve ourselves.
If you believe in evolution, then we all came from Africa, worked our way up to Asia Minor.
Right.
Some of us split and went to Europe, and others went kind of up and up through Siberia and came across the land bridge, supposedly. But that's still just a theory, and there's not much evidence to prove that actually happened. Most of the stuff that I have read about shows that they didn't probably come across the land bridge, but they came by boats.
Right.
That there were a lot of like Polynesians and so forth who came across and by boats and actually settled along the coast of California and some as north. Later on, when the Inuits came over, they came over across through the land bridge to the ice and snow. And the Inuits and the Aleutians, they seem to have come from that area. But a lot of the native people that you have down in South America and Central America, southern United States, when that was a big land mass, probably didn't even come over. They might have come over by boats. I know years ago we had, when I was young, we used to have the Kon-Tiki theory. Remember that one? No?
No.
I recognize
probably
the
too
word,
young,
but I
but,
don't know what the theory
An
is.
older person like me would know about the Kon-Tiki theory. It was a movie that came out, and it showed how the Polynesians came across in their boats and landed along the western coast of South America. Easter Island was an example.
So we have big influence on either coast, but was there much going on in between the coasts?
Well, one of the latest things you read about, the books that I've been reading about, have it that there were Europeans that came across somehow. If you study the way geography was at that point, where the seas were low, that like from the British Isles, for instance, they settled in Maryland and Delaware. There's evidence to prove that somewhat by the stone formations and the points that they have there. They find the points, well, you call them arrowheads,
yeah.
but we don't call them, we call them points, because the points could be for arrows or they could be for spears. And the Clovis points, there are Clovis points that they have found, not very many, a certain period, where they have found Clovis points in Maryland and Delaware, and the only other place they find them is out in New Mexico.
Oh,
Arizona and New
interesting.
Mexico.
Wow. That's a
So
big...
the earliest Clovis points are out there. And there are other type of points that were found. So there's all kinds of theories, and nobody really knows if you believe in evolution, where we actually came from.
Right.
Well, I think that if they had come over and there was so much that they could have learned from the Native Americans. Instead, they just rounded them up and forced them to believe what they believed, and it's too bad because they missed out on so much, the way I feel.
Yeah. Even though I'm a Christian, I try to marriage. I still use the Native American influence, but I also believe in Christianity as well.
Mm-hmm.
So my people were Christians, as I said, back in the 1600s.
Mm-hmm. Well, Christ, I read somewhere where Christ said, watch the Indians people and watch their spirituality and see how they behave, and that's the way we should all behave. I'd read that a long time ago. So
Yeah.
Anyway, you want to tell us a little bit about like some of your traditions, your heritage, your things that you brought with us, and
Well, a few of the items that I brought are just some. Usually when I do a demonstration, I have a whole basket full of stuff that I present. I show, for instance, I made this basket. It's homemade by myself.
that's nice.
Wow. To give lessons?
I could. This here is a war club. I use this when I do my dancing routines. When I'm doing a serious, I'll say war dance, so you'll maybe understand a little bit better. But I don't really think of it that
Now,
way.
were those
Spiritual.
spikes
What is that?
carved
What's
out
that made of
there,
and so
or-
forth?
What is it made out of?
What is that, Bob?
It's a very simple type thing. What it is, it's a small tree. This is the root that's in the ground.
root?
Oh, that's the
Oh,
root.
my goodness, looking at it that way.
Wow.
But it made an excellent club, and it gave certain people headaches. It gave your enemies headaches.
I bet.
Yeah, I would think. Wow.
So I think it's made, this particular one, I did not make it, but it was made by a Penobscot up in Maine by the name of Stan Neptune. And over here is his signature.
Oh, yeah. I
Can
can
you
see
see it
that. I
there?
don't know. Can they get a close-up of that? No, can't get any closer.
Yeah.
By his finger.
Probably
It's a
not,
little
but
carved
Anyway, it
in.
shows a zag with a cross, or a cross of, like a
Oh,
snake.
here it comes. Here we come. Okay, now turn it out. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can see it. Right there, folks. See it? Right
See
there.
that in there?
Right
That's
there.
his signature. He's a Penobscot.
Penobscot.
Yeah, Penobscots are in, around Bangor, Maine.
Okay.
Old town, up around University of Maine. That's where the Penobscots preside today. They have what they call Indian Island up there.
Now, if we get into the whole warfare aspect of the Native Americans, do you think that that's been blown out of proportion? I think that, when other cultures came over here and considered you savages and
What, the war club?
bloodthirsty and like
Well, I'm pretty sure that I use it for ceremonial purposes. I use it for when I'm dancing and I do my honoring. I hold up the club to up to the Creator. And here is a knife that was made out of flint.
wow.
And this is wood.
Gorgeous.
Wood here, right?
Yeah, it's wood. This is all flint knapping. Probably took a week to make that.
Wow.
Because it takes one big piece, and then you just completely take an antler, probably an antler or a sharp piece of stone. It's done by breaking and breaking and breaking and breaking until you form what you want.
Wow.
Very nice.
And it's tied together with the wooden handle with this, I forget what you call this stuff, that it's like little vines that
Rattan.
grow, and then you wrap it around and it holds it in place.
Very nice.
Yeah. Now, earlier I showed you this. Maybe, I don't know,
Yeah, the turtle.
Oh, the turtle.
it's a pouch. Makes a nice, excellent pouch.
That's beautiful.
It is.
And in this, probably when you were on a hunting trip, so forth, you would probably put some food in here, or on a little
Lunch bag.
things, stuff that you might want to carry with you. A lot of dried food.
In the spirit of the turtle.
In the spirit of the turtle.
Yes.
And
Carries its home on its back.
this is a war shirt.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Normally, when I do
That's
my
beautiful.
dancing, my presentations, I wear the shirt plus leggings and loincloths. So these are just a few items that I have with me here today. Sorry if I...
So speaking
No,
of
they're
lunches
beautiful.
and food and what you'd carry with you, what's typical for you're one of my fix your mic a little bit.
Yeah.
Pull it up.
And
Colin.
yeah,
Yeah.
no,
we'll
that's
just-
all right. We're just having a little technical thing here, folks. Okay, you're all set.
All right.
There you go.
There, all right.
What would you carry? Well, you'd
Yeah, what
carry
would you carry?
a lot of dried food. You'd even have dried corn and veggies. You know about the Three Sisters garden.
No.
No?
Oh, you never heard of the Three Sisters garden? No, I thought that's pretty much known. That school kids learn that when they go up to the institute up in Washington, Connecticut. The Three Sisters were corn, squash, and beans,
Oh. Yeah.
and they grew together. And all those could be, almost all could be dried. And the beans, the reason they did it that way is that squash is an excellent ground cover. Anybody that's planted squash knows how it likes to spread around, covers the ground and shades the ground, and keeps it very moist. What a lot of people do is they take and they grab it, put a stick in the middle, and they grow beans and they wrap it around the stick
Yeah,
all the
bean
time.
poles, yeah.
Which seemed like, the native people seemed like a lot of work. So what they did is they says, why don't we plant corn in the middle? It has a stalk. As the beans grow, we just wrap it around the corn stalk.
Oh, wow.
So it served three purposes. They call them Three Sisters because they were usually planted together and they complemented each other and took care of each other. Just like Three Sisters would
That's
do.
really
Using
nice.
all this equipment we make to grow gardens and agriculture and
Yeah, right?
not just using the
You have
common
the simple,
sense.
beautiful, common sense way.
You'd be surprised I have the time now.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
The amount of food that we eat today, and I was even surprised at the list when I saw it.
Oh, how many are
How many foods we have
from the
today
natives?
Yeah.
that were derived from, that weren't available? They weren't available before the discovery of America.
Okay, tell us.
For instance, the tomato, which the Italians seem to have adopted.
That got a bad reputation for a while, though, right? Like
It did at first, yes. The tomato was indigenous to the Americas. So until they discovered America, the Italians did not have tomatoes.
Oh, what did they do?
Wow.
What did we do?
Italians without tomatoes?
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
But anyway, I go through this list, and
Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
amazed at some of these foods.
Tell us some of them.
How about allspice?
That's my.
I
I love that. I had a rabbit. named
Amaranth?
Allspice.
I don't even know.
Amaranth, yeah.
Amaranth. Artichokes, avocados, kidneys, limas, butter, navy, all those type of beans, blackberries, blueberries. Now here's one that the Dutch or the people of the Netherlands have adopted, but actually it was not theirs. Chocolate.
Really?
Chocolate was indigenous to America. It came from South America. Cashew nuts, black cherry, corn maize, cranberry, Concord grapes, guava, huckleberry, papaya, peanuts, pecans, pineapple, of course, came from
Hawaii?
I'm not sure whether they actually came from Hawaii or they were.
Southern climates, yeah.
Of course, popcorn, and the one that also got a kind of a bad rap at the beginning was the potato.
Did it? Really?
Oh yes, when they took the potato and they shipped it to Europe, some people didn't adopt it right away, like the Italians didn't adopt it. They liked the tomato, but they didn't like the potato. But the English, again, I'll apologize to any English people that I offend here, but the English people had the Irish people
Right.
and so forth,
Yeah.
and they were more like slaves to them.
Oh,
And
really?
They brought the potato to Europe and fed it to the Irish.
Which ultimately
Became their
led
product.
to a potato famine, right?
Yeah. Well, during the potato famine, from what I understand, there was plenty of food. But the English didn't want the Irish to have it. So, since the potato
Gee.
famine, and that's what they were feeding them. Now, somebody can contest that if they want to. The pumpkin, raspberry, wild rice, sassafras, sunflower, the sweet potato, the tomato, the turkey, and here's another one that surprised me was vanilla. Vanilla came from the Caribbean.
Madagascar. Was that from Madagascar?
Wow.
I always thought vanilla was from.
Vanilla, yeah.
Vanilla was Madagascar?
I thought so, but I don't
That's
know.
in the Pacific. Well, that's the list. I mean, that list could be false, but
Cool.
Yeah.
Very good.
so those are anyway some of the items that.
That's interesting. People didn't know that. Are there many states and cities named after Indian words?
Oh, another one of my favorite ones. When I have that. Did I enter it? Oh, yes. Well, as you go through the list, and people don't realize how many states that were actually from native words. Our own state of Connecticut.
Yeah.
Connecticut.
The real name would have been Quinatucket, meaning beside the long tribal river.
Wow.
That's an Algonquin word. But if we start at the top of the list, we have Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Illinois, Indiana, of course, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Massachusetts, which means an Algonquin word meaning at or about the Great Hills. It was actually the western part of Massachusetts where they had all the big hills. That's where they got their name, Massachusetts. Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi,
So we'll
Missouri.
we'll take the natives' land away from them, but we'll use native names
Nebraska,
for the states.
North
and
Dakota,
others to-
Ohio, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, which was a word meaning friends,
Oh,
Utah,
wow.
for the Ute people, that there's still Ute people living out there, in Wisconsin, Wyoming, plus there was various cities like Chicago, and the one that surprises a lot of people is Yankee, was
Really?
an Indian word.
Was it?
Oh, yes, it was a word for English. And that became Yankee.
Wow.
So even that word wasn't theirs.
All these things.
So those are all names. Places that I didn't name were, when I talk about influence, Chicago, Chesapeake Bay, Manhattan, which means it was an Algonquin word for isolated thing in water.
Are there places in Connecticut with Indian names?
Oh, are there? That's another one of my favorite ones.
My daughters were just learning about the Quinnipiacs.
Well, we have Mattatuck. Now, Mattatuck was an Algonquin word, and it means place with no trees. Mattatuck is part of Waterbury. And places like Meriden, which meant Pleasant Valley. Bantam, Connecticut, place where he prays. It came from the word Bantaham.
Wow.
Lake compounds. Well, we have the rivers like the Housatonic, the Pequabic, the I can go on and on.
Quinnipiac.
Hammonasset. All those were native words. Naugatuck, I think, did I say that one?
Mm-hmm.
Mattatuck, Naugatuck.
All these things we took came from the natives,
Yes.
and they called it their own.
They changed a lot of them. They were native
I
words.
believe it. Yeah, okay,
Now,
tell us
for
about
instance, if you look at the bottom of this, can you make it out? Geokiki, geeky.
There's a little glare there.
Can you make that out there?
that. Yeah,
All
I
right.
think they have it.
Yes. That means, I never found the meaning for it, but that was the name of Thomaston. It's the town which I live in now. But that was the original name of Thomaston and East Litchfield. So, but there's a lot of rivers and lakes that were named from native words.
So what is the sensitivity of Native Americans?
Well, the sensitivity
Speak freely.
is, for instance, don't use the word squaw. It's very sensitive to Native women. It doesn't mean exactly what it sounds like, and I won't go into too many details on that. It's a very derogatory type word.
It is.
It is very, such a thing as, what do you call us? Are we Native Americans?
Mm-hmm.
Are we Indians? Are we the original Americans? Even though we weren't Americans until 1924. In 1924, they passed a law that
amazing.
says that all Native Americans can now become citizens of the United States.
That is unbelievable.
This is
That blows
I'm
my
beside
mind.
myself with this. It's like
Yes.
you were the original citizens.
Right.
But we had no rights whatsoever. Not whatsoever. Put us on a reservation and keep us there. So 1924, even though most all wars that America has fought in, Native Americans have fought alongside of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We all know about the Navajo Code Talkers and the
Code Talkers, yes.
all those people who fought for
I
America.
just made a movie about that, yeah.
And even in the First World War, the Choctaw were code talkers. They weren't code talkers. They were. What they did is they used to put them on radios, and whatever radios they had in the First World War, and they would speak their language. And of course, the Germans never broke that one. And then later on, they had the Comanche. I think it's the Comanches that were in Europe. Then they had the Navajos in the Pacific, and the code was never broken. Never broken. And because of that, thousands and thousands and thousands of American lives were saved.
Mm-hmm.
But even, I said, back to World War I, they weren't even citizens.
But we'll use you for war. We'll use you
So
to
we
fight
use
our
you and we
fight.
use your language, even though at one time all those reservations out west weren't allowed to speak the language.
Oh,
When they took them off they shipped them off to boarding school, they weren't allowed to. But a little bit backfired. What happened is they sent the native people off to school. Some never returned, but others got educated. And when they started getting educated, they went into a lot of the old land records and a lot of the old treaties, and they found out information that they used against the government.
Wow.
oh,
So some of it, backfired, worked against them.
I wonder what made them make that decision to make you citizens. Someone must have had a part in that. Some people who knew and believed in everything else, they must have changed it like people get things changed today.
I think it was part of the simulation process. They felt that
Well, that was right around the time where women got the vote and
right after,
started to see, I think the women started to speak up probably.
Probably, yes.
Well, they decided the simulation process of the boarding schools. The boarding schools didn't work. That system didn't work. It did educate some of them, but on the other hand, it did not. They didn't lay down.
Right. Didn't tear them away from their culture and their
Culture
roots.
would.
Yeah.
A lot of them went back to the reservation afterwards. You can only push them so far, and they went back to the reservation afterwards. So in 1924, they thought, even today you hear about it all the time, why don't we do away with the reservations? They're so jealous of the Mashantuckets and the Mohegans having had their casinos and so forth,
Their little glory spot there. Huh?
that they say, well, why should they have it? Let's do away with them.
Who's saying let's do away with it?
Oh, I hear it all the time.
From
Some of
who?
the native culture?
Well, I read in the
Native
paper, like,
Americans or
not too long ago, there was a big article back in the, like in the Waterbury paper, they had a couple articles there about it's time to do away with the reservation systems.
Who's saying this? Are the government,
Politicians.
the politicians?
Well, I think it's people, jealousy. It's these correspondents or these people that write these newspaper articles.
media.
They're the ones that I read it from. And in other words, like they believe that, like in Kent, for instance, they believe, well, if we give them federal recognition, that's automatically a casino. It's not true. It's not automatically a
Yeah,
casino.
not every.
It has to be negotiated.
yeah.
My people are federally recognized. We don't have a casino. We don't have any type of gambling, but we get the other benefits that the federal government presents to bring the Native American forward. You know, such as education, health benefits, and housing, and so forth. And we get all those benefits, but we don't have a casino. We have federal recognition.
Well, those casinos are not just run by American Indians, right? Or Native
They're
Americans.
No, they're owned by the
owned by,
American
yeah.
Indians,
But they're, yeah.
the Nantuckets. Even though
It's
there's these stories going around that say that they belong to the Arabs and so forth, because what happened was when they were started, like the Mohegans, when they were starting their casino, they needed money, and you couldn't mortgage. Nobody can own the land on the reservation, so you can't mortgage the land. So none of the banks and so forth would finance them. So the only people they could get their money from is some of these rich Arab countries. Like the Mashantuckets actually borrowed their money from another Indian tribe up in Maine who didn't have a casino and never negotiated for a casino, because you have to have gambling within the state. And Connecticut has a part of their law, the loophole in their law that allows for casino nights, which allowed fire stations and fire departments and churches and so forth. to have-
right, the
It has to
bingo
be
and all those.
within
But
the state law
gambling is
regulations.
gambling.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you allow them to have gambling, you have to allow the native people to have gambling on their reservations, if it's negotiated.
So they want to take away the reservations, which would mean your federal funding, right? And then what happens with the people?
They become just like everybody else. They did that in Alaska. They had to incorporate all their land into these corporations, and the corporations are only good for, I'm not sure how many years, I'll say 25. At the end of 25 years, the whole thing gets dissolved. But every native Alaskan was given, I think it was like $15,000, plus certain other benefits, which will be done away with in 25 years. Well, whatever it was.
They're paying them off for their land. Yeah.
So they're paying them off. And under this incorporation, native people can sell their land to other people. See, when you build a home on the reservation, you don't own the land. So nobody can take it away from you. It's more or less yours for the use. And if you want to sell it, you have to either sell it back to the tribe, or you have to sell it to another native person that lives, of that tribe. You can't just sell it to, somebody off the reservation, even if they are native, but you have to sell it to a person on the reservation.
And that's because the government owns the land, right?
The government don't own the land.
Who owns the land?
You own the land.
Supposedly the people own the land, but it is a commune.
Oh, okay.
They don't own individual. They don't own their.
It's not
Yeah.
individual
They have
land.
a place, a
Parcels,
house, a
right.
dwelling, but the land underneath does not belong to them. All they own is a house. So if they want to move the house, well, you can do that, I guess. Want to go through a lot of trouble.
I never knew there were so many rules and regulations
Oh,
that
there's-
Seems so
they
complex.
put against you
yes.
people. Yeah, I never knew all that.
There's a.
Do you feel close to other Native American cultures, or do you feel like they're all individual entities?
Good question.
Well, in the early days, when we're talking about within the last 100 years, most of the people on the East Coast have had contact for almost 300 to 400 years.
Okay.
Some of the people out west have only had it about 100. The last Indian Wars were like in 1890, Wounded Knee. And a lot of those people at one time believed that the people in the east, natives in the east, got contaminated too much.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Are there prejudice against, different
But then
tribes?
later on, as time went by, they realized that,
It's happening to them too.
well, it's happening to them, and not only that, you can only gain strength by unity.
Yes. True.
The more united you are and the bigger the group is, the more strength you have. You'll notice that even today, the ones that have the most, they're still minorities, but yet they have a lot to say, have strength.
Powerful voices.
More powerful voices, especially when it comes to voting.
Really?
And that affects a lot of things. So there are not enough Native people to affect the voting most of the time, except maybe like in Arizona or Oklahoma. But so we're not a very powerful group. Back in the 60s and 70s, I mentioned the American Indian movement, when they had the March on Washington and so forth. And for a while, Native people from all over came and marched. And that helped with unity and gave us a little more force. And then when they had the second occupation of Wounded Knee back in the, I think it was 70s, they had a little more strength there. That's where they were surrounded by the federal agents on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And they were surrounded and just stayed there for, the whole situation was deadlocked for a couple of weeks because, one, the federal agents didn't have any right to be there in the first place. But then on the other hand, since it's federal land, they felt they should be. And the Native people says, well, we're going to stay right here until they finally had to give in. And of course, even years ago, they had places like Alcatraz in California where they had occupations trying to push the issue.
They made that movie, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee.
Yeah.
Was about that particular thing.
It was, the book. And
Okay, so...
that was about the first occupation. There was two occupations. One was in 1890, and the other one was in the 1970s.
Remake. So now you perform powwows, or what's a powwow, and
Well, a powwow...
what is the...
I got involved about 25 years ago. I got involved in the series of powwows. I belong to the Spirit of Quintucket, and we held powwows all over the state of Connecticut. We had them in Haddam, we had them in Rocky Hill, we had them in Farmington, we had them in Somers, we had them, and what it is, a powwow is where all the Native people get together, and you have vendors, and in the east, we open them up to the public.
Yeah, that's a good way
And
for
like we
the
have
public
vendors,
to...
and it's a good way for them to sell crafts and make a little money.
Yes, I've been to some. They're very nice.
And they have cook shacks and so forth, and it allows them. And we charge a certain admission.
Which isn't very much. All the ones I've been to, it wasn't very much.
No, they're not. They don't usually bankrupt anybody. You don't have to mortgage your home to get to them. But we had them all over, and they've kind of died out a little bit because what we do is we have a circle, we have a fire, we have dancing, we have ceremonies, opening ceremonies, we have memorial services, we have honoring services. Each type of dancing, even though if I can go on to that, do I have time?
We've got about
2 minutes.
2 minutes, yeah.
2 minutes? Well, some people laugh at native dancing sometimes, but it's not. It's a form of prayer.
Yes.
Yes, I've heard that.
It's a very honoring type thing, and we don't allow any laughing. All the men, unless you're in regalia, have to remove their headgear, and nobody's allowed to take pictures.
It's like removing your ego, right? Taking your feathers off.
Well, the thing about it is when we dance, we also ask our forefathers and foremothers to come and dance with us. And that's why we don't allow any picture taking,
Oh, wow.
because you never know who might be in the picture.
What might
Right,
show
yeah,
up
that
on
does-
that film?
It does show up at times.
We've
Spirit
had,
shows up.
we've
Yeah.
had guests come on with
Pictures of spirit. Yeah. You know, that's what I've always loved was your spirituality and your beliefs. I've always loved that. I've always followed different things about American Indians, and I've always wanted to have someone like you on the show, and I'm so glad that I got to meet you at the American Indian Institute.
The Institute for American Indian Studies.
Right. That's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
They have big cardboard cutouts of you up there and everything.
Yeah, this is
If you want to see Bill, you go up there and you'll see a cardboard cutout of
see
him.
the cutout. I don't think he's ever in on that or not.
Yeah,
But this is in a little brochure that I have of the something
that's
else.
a cardboard cutout.
But that's actually me in full regalia trading with the Dutch.
Wow.
And if you're very lucky like I was, he was there in person that day. And that's how we met, and I invited him on the show. So, anyway, is there any last words you'd like to leave with us before we
No,
go
I just
another
hope
minute?
I just hope that I was informative and
Oh, you
Very.
were.
and that
So you're available for lectures and so forth if people, what would you,
yes, I do.
they want to contact you?
I do lectures around the state, and I've been like to a couple colleges and a couple of libraries and so forth.
Very
Okay,
good.
good.
And when I do that, I bring extra stuff that I have.
Show off all of your
Gear
gear.
and
Very
so forth.
good.
Well, then this is, if, you know,
Sometimes I do a slide presentation or yeah.
all right, so if anybody wants to, we'll give you how to, information on Bill, on how to get a hold of him, and if you'd like him to give lectures and see what he has to offer for you and everything,
Yeah,
that'll be very, very
educational
nice.
experience. Very.
So we're going to have to say goodnight.
And thank
And-
you for coming.
Okay.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful having
And
you
as we
here.
native people do it.
Is that how you do it?
Okay.
Wanna do
All
that?
right. Very good.
That feels
Very good.
good.
It's a
Feels
pleasure
better.
having you here. It really was a pleasure. Okay, and we're going to give our audience information about the show if they would like to
yeah.
find out more about it.
To reach us with any questions you may have on this or any of our past shows, and to find days and times our show will be playing in your area, please email us at healoutsidethebox@yahoo.com or call 203-627-7966. Now we have our quote for the
We're
night.
at quote for the night. Okay, I think I'll put my glasses on for this so I don't
It's a
miss
long
any
one,
words.
Rosemary, tonight.
Well, we'll go fast. Always,
Oh, excuse-
okay. Always be kind and loving to others, but also let yourself be led by the trustworthy inner voice as to whether or not to offer a word of spirit or advice of any kind to another. Each individual shining ray of God has its own part to play, and human knowledge cannot judge what is right and wrong for the next step for that person. Listen for the voice of compassion and do as it says. Ask and do as it says. And yet, when that presence of living compassion wells up within you, without your asking, in the presence of someone who seems to need aid, then comply unhesitatingly. Be obedient to the inner prompting, even when the request is for you to do or say something that seems illogical to the human mind. Trust the one loving mind, the only mind, for it knows what is best. The Creator.
Thank you
Okay,
for
thank you
joining
so
us.
much for joining us. Good night.
Tune in again.
See you next time.
As you look out through the window to the world you have made, always know you are the vision. See the truth, darkness fade.